They had stopped calling for help. Hope was a currency they could no longer afford. Down to their last rounds, a SEAL team was cornered, pinned against the cold, unforgiving stone of a canyon that had already claimed too many. No pilot dared to fly into that valley. Not again. So the radios and the world went quiet. Then from the forward station, a sound cut through the silence. A low metallic howl rising fast. It was not the sound of rescue. It was the sound of vengeance. And as the roar of engines shook the sky itself, every man on the ground froze, their eyes lifting in disbelief because they remembered that sound. And one whisper, like a prayer, broke the silence. "She's back." The radio crackled once, a desperate spark in the digital void, then broke into a storm of static. A voice fractured by terrain, and terror clawed its way through. "Delta 3. Contact north and east. 2 down. Request immediate." And then silence. A profound and final quiet that was louder than any explosion. Inside the dimly lit command tent of Forward Operating Base Candor, every head turned toward the comms table. The air, already thick with the smell of dust and stale coffee, grew heavy, charged with the weight of unspoken fears. The operator replayed the burst, maxing the volume. But the words ended the same way. Static. Nothing. A young lieutenant marked the grid on the wall map, his hand hesitating for a moment before the marker touched the paper. The red circle landed on a jagged line of topography designated Black Ridge 9. But no one called it that. To the soldiers who had to live and die in this land, it was known by another name, the Devil's Throat. A corridor of rock and wind that had erased drones from the sky, swallowed a scout helicopter whole, and consumed an entire patrol without leaving a trace. It was a place where signals went to die, and often so did men. The tent fell into a heavy, oppressive silence. No one volunteered air cover. No one had to say why. Everyone knew the Valley ate aircraft. It was a kill box designed by nature and perfected by the enemy. A place where surface-to-air missiles waited like sleeping vipers in the shadows of the rock. The colonel, a man whose face was a road map of a dozen forgotten conflicts, spoke without raising his voice, his words cutting through the tension. Anyone ever flown the Devil's Throat and lived? At first, the silence pressed harder than the desert heat. Then a young intel officer, his face pale, swallowed hard and muttered, "There's one." All eyes snapped to him. Major Carmen Reeves, call sign Thunder 7. 2 years ago, she cleared it solo. That name froze the air in the tent. Her legend was a ghost that still haunted these forward bases. A story told in hushed, reverent tones by mechanics and crew chiefs. Her canyon run had saved 10 men, but the cost had been immense. Her aircraft, Thunder 7, had nearly collapsed on landing, its frame twisted, its spirit broken. And Reeves, she had been grounded, an eagle with clipped wings. The colonel's jaw flexed, a single muscle twitching in his cheek. Status. The officer's fingers flew across a keyboard, pulling up a roster. Temporarily restricted from flight duties, sir. Psych review was never officially closed. 94 kilometers away, Camp Morrison shimmered under the morning haze, a mirage of order in a land of chaos. Carmen Reeves sat on a dented metal bench near the mouth of Hangar 6, her gaze fixed on the ghost in the shadows. Her A-10C Thunderbolt II sat half covered by a tarp, looking tired and forgotten. Its gray paint was faded with unpainted panels and a patch of bare metal that still showed the scars from her last mission. She wasn't cleared to touch it. She wasn't even supposed to be here. But every morning, this was her ritual, a silent vigil for the machine that was as much a part of her as her own heart. A mechanic walked past, his sleeves stained with grease. He didn't stop. He didn't even look at her. He just dropped 2 words like contraband at her feet. Black Ridge 9. Reeves stood immediately. No orders were needed. No briefing was required. The name of the valley was enough. It was a call she had been waiting 2 years to answer. She crossed the sun-baked tarmac with steady, purposeful steps, her flight suit not zipped to regulation, her hair escaping its tight bun. She didn't care. The crew chief saw her coming. They hesitated, exchanged a look, and then one by one they stepped aside. They remembered her canyon run. They knew that look in her eyes. If she was climbing back into that cockpit now, it was because lives depended on it. She swung into the cockpit like she had never left, her body moving with a familiar practiced grace. Her hands flew across the console, flipping switches, her fingers finding their place by memory alone. The dormant systems groaned to life, reluctant at first, but functional. Diagnostics scrolled across the main display. A litany of failures and warnings. Fuel at 67%. Hydraulics marginal. Flares questionable. But the guns were green. It was good enough. Not perfect, but Thunder 7 would fly. The tower's voice sharp with alarm cut through her headset. Thunder 7, you're not cleared for takeoff. Identify yourself immediately. Reeves ignored it. The engines roared, the sound building from a whine to a deafening scream. She released the brakes and pushed the throttle forward. The hog, the beast she had been forbidden to touch, rolled forward, dragging a plume of dust behind it like a resurrected dragon shaking off the sleep of ages. Who the hell just took off in a warthog? A controller shouted over the comms, but it was too late. Major Carmen Reeves was already in the air, a renegade angel on a mission of vengeance, and she was flying straight into the devil's throat. Above the sprawling, dusty footprint of Camp Morrison, Thunder 7 banked hard to the east, a gray specter against the pale blue canvas of the dawn sky. The air was calm, deceptively peaceful, but Reeves' mind was a storm of calculation and memory. She wasn't just flying. She was retracing a map burned into her soul. Every bend in the rock, every treacherous crosswind pocket, every ridge where a missile launcher could be hiding. The devil's throat didn't just kill with fire. It killed with silence. It lured you in with a false sense of security. Then the rocks would come alive and the sky would fall. That was the warning she remembered most. She adjusted the trim manually, her hands fighting the stiff, unfamiliar feel of the yoke. 2 years of neglect had left their mark on the old warbird. The avionics lagged by half a second, a fatal delay for any other pilot. But Reeves' instinct filled the gap. This wasn't flying by software. This was flying by muscle and memory. A dance between woman and machine that no computer could replicate. The entrance to the canyon rose before her. A jagged wound in the earth. Steep rock walls clawed at the sky, cutting the sunlight into thin, sharp slivers. The wind, a wild and unpredictable beast, buffeted the 810C from all angles. A current designed by the mountains themselves to flip unwary pilots and dash them against the stone. She dipped lower, dropping the hog until she could feel the ground effect, a cushion of compressed air that held her stable just feet above the canyon floor. It was a dangerous, reckless maneuver. It was the only way to survive. Back at FOB Candor, the command tent was a pressure cooker of clashing voices. "Ground her now. She's in violation of a direct order," an officer shouted, his face red with fury. "She's their only chance." Another voice countered, quiet but firm. The colonel silenced them all with a single raised hand. He stared at the map, his jaw set like granite. "Strike Team Delta is still breathing," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "That's all that matters." Meanwhile, on the floor of the Devil's Throat, Delta 3 fought to hold on. They were trapped in the ruins of a broken livestock shed, the air thick with the smell of blood and cordite. Their sandbags, hastily thrown together, were soaked dark with the life leaking from their wounded. A medic's hands, slick with sweat, slipped on a tourniquet. The spotter's tripod was broken, its legs held together with duct tape, a fragile monument to their desperation. They were boxed in. Their ammo was almost gone. Their hope was a flickering candle in a hurricane. But then, the spotter lifted his head, his eyes squinting at the sliver of sky visible between the canyon walls. A faint dark shape skimmed just above the rock, moving with an impossible speed and grace. "Wait," he whispered, his voice cracking. The others froze, listening, and then they heard it, a low rumble that grew into a roar, a sound that rolled across the valley like thunder trapped under stone. It was a sound they had only heard in stories. The sound of a legend. Someone dared to speak the name Thunder, and then another, his voice cracking with a mixture of relief and disbelief. The words spread through the beleaguered team like oxygen, a jolt of life into dying men above them. Thunder 7 knifed into the heart of the devil's throat. Wings wide, nose steady, no escort, no clearance, just Reeves and a warplane built to take punishment and deliver hell. The corridor narrowed, the rock walls closing in until they were only 245 feet apart. Her proximity alarm shrieked a frantic, useless scream. She killed them with a flick of a switch. She didn't need the noise. She needed the silence. She needed to focus. The engine screamed in defiance of the terrain. Shadows shifted along the ridges. Figures ducked behind rocks, preparing their ambush. Reeves kept her hands firm on the throttle, her knuckles white. Thunder 7 rattled and groaned. A wounded beast answering its master's call. The kill box was just ahead, waiting, but if the devil's throat wanted her again, it would have to try a hell of a lot harder this time. The devil's throat swallowed Thunder 7 whole. The rock walls closed in, squeezing the sky until the sunlight vanished, replaced by a deep, oppressive gloom. Every gust of wind was a physical blow. A giant's hand trying to shove her down into the unforgiving stone below. Major Carmen Reeves fought the controls, her muscles burning, trimming the aircraft manually as muscle memory took over where technology failed. She flew at 175 feet, then dropped to 155. At 115, the canyon floor became a terrifying, dizzying blur beneath her. Ahead, shadows moved along the ridges. Figures hunched over tubes resting on their shoulders. Missile teams waiting for a heat signature, waiting for the kill. On the ground, Delta 3 clung to the last vestiges of cover. The medic, his hands now stained red, worked desperately to stop the bleeding of a fallen teammate. The spotter, his duct-taped tripod, a symbol of their fading hope, peered through his scope. When a blur of wings cut across the sky, he froze. "She's back," he breathed, and the words were a prayer. For the first time all day, heads lifted from behind the sandbags. Hope, which had been a foreign concept just moments before, now had a sound, and it was the roar of an A-10C Warthog. Thunder 7 dived across the ridge at an impossible angle. Reeves squeezed the trigger once. The GU-8/A Avenger cannon roared, a sound like a storm being given physical shape. A line of fire, a torrent of 30mm rounds, shredded the stone ridge. Dust and rock burst outward, swallowing the dark silhouettes of the ambush team. They vanished in a hail of smoke and debris before they could even fire a shot. Reeves didn't wait for confirmation. Her left screen flickered, a cascade of warning bars flashing across the display. Diagnostics scrolled in a frantic red stream. Flares offline. Fuel at 39%. Left stabilizer unstable. She muttered once, her voice a low growl under her breath. Then she banked hard, pulling the hog into a tight, gut-wrenching turn along the canyon wall. The wing tip so close she could almost feel the texture of the rock. Another cluster of fighters scrambled in the open below, caught by surprise. There was no time for a lock-on, no software to assist. She aimed with instinct with the iron sights with the memory of a 100 training runs. The cannon barked again, this time in short controlled bursts. Figures tumbled into the dust, their weapons clattering against the stone. Another path cleared. Her eyes flicked to the fuel gauge. It was bleeding down. 35%, still enough for one more run, maybe two if she was lucky. In the command tent, a timer appeared on the wall. Rotary detach 45 inbound. From minutes to landing zone. It wasn't long, but in the devil's throat, for minutes was an eternity. Reeves climbed just a fraction, not to escape but to bait. She wanted the hidden launchers, the patient ones, to expose themselves. Thunder 7, the wounded beast became the lure. The trap snapped. An infrared flash. A streak of white heat erupted from the western slope. A missile locked on and rose fast, hungry for her engines. Reeves didn't flinch. She rolled Thunder 7 into the curve of the canyon wall, using the massive stone formation to mask her heat signature. The missile Seeker, confused, lost its lock. Its nose veered wide. It detonated against empty air. A brilliant, useless bloom of fire against the rock. The shock wave slammed into her fuselage, a physical blow that rattled every bolt and rivet in the airframe. But the Hog, battered and bruised, kept flying. One by one, the helicopters lifted heavy with the men she had saved. Reeves banked deliberately above them. Not fast, not hidden. She wanted any enemy fighters left below to see her. The shadow of the Hog stretched across the ridge, a declaration. Air superiority had returned, and it had a name.